jab, uppercut, leave you laid out on the floor. Try to duck and roll, hit and miss, now you counting stars. Should've practiced more, should've hit the mask, get out there more. Claim that you're the best. You gotta show me, son, actions over words, baby boy, is you real or what? Talking way too much, world come. Back sports, talking way too much, world come. Back sports, talking way too much, world come. Back sports,
WCS back on the boulevard once again. Salute to everyone that's in the building. Pop, what's good? What's good? WCS, what's good? I see you in the chat. Man, this is another hitter, mixed martial arts on deck. We want to talk about UFC 281. Man, listen, they never disappoint over there, man. UFC 281 is going to be fire. Now, if you look at the thumbnail, not everybody on the thumbnail is going to compete at UFC 281. All right? But I want to try to build this up and help you understand how Dusrin Poirier and Michael Chandler is going to play a role in the scheme of everything. All right? The man in the middle, holding the belt up, is Islam Makhachev. And then the guy, as you're looking at it to the right, is Alexander Volkanovski. Now, this is extremely an important matchup or a so-called championship match with a contenders line in the weight. Because Alexander Volkanovski is current reigning defending 145-pound featherweight champion. This dude is bad. Like, he haven't lost since he's been in the UFC. He can fight. He has some of the best hands in MMA as we speak. He defended his title, I believe, maybe 4 times. Let me check. Because this is a crazy freaking card. Crazy card. It's worth every penny of the pay-per-view. Every freaking penny. So therefore, let me bring him up right quick. So, Alexander Volkanovski, I'm going to touch on him briefly. He fought Jose Aldo, legend of the sport, right? I mean, one of the guys who was at featherweight doing his thing for quite some time. And Max Holloway was able to take the belt off Jose. I mean, he was able to, I think, fight Jose Aldo like 3 times. They had somewhat like a rivalry going. But Alexander Volkanovski built up another rivalry. It's easy to have rivalries in the UFC or Bellator or any other organization when you have the competition always having the opportunity to fight one another. So he defeats Max Holloway for the 145-pound belt. Then he defends it. He defeated him in 2019, December 2019, then defended it July 2020, and won a split decision. he would go on to fight Brian T. City Ortega, which everybody was waiting on that fight. I mean, because, you know, Caesar Gracie train and all that. Like, hey, he was the next coming at one point in time. Very, very high level BJJ. But he had to work on his hands, just like Damian Maia one time. He ended up beating Brian Ortega. And then Ortega went in there and fought Chung Sung Jung. Defeated him in round 4. And then he would get a third fight with Max Holloway. At this point in time, you know, people was wondering, Max Holloway still got it. He looked good against Calvin Kattar. Man, people was like, man, he looked like he's ready. He went in there and Alexander just punished him. I mean, his hands was much sharper. His boxing rudder was much sharper. His hands just looked like they was on a whole nother level when it came to his boxing, man. His combination sets combined with his kicks, his punch placement, his speed, the way he was light on his feet, moving around. He go in there and defeat Max Holloway in July this year. Ends that trilogy. Ends it. Now what he does, like so many other fighters in the UFC have done, like a Conor McGregor, Daniel Cormier, Amanda Nunes, you know what I'm saying? Henry Cejudo. Is Alexander Volkanovski, after fight Max Holloway, he's looking to move up to 155. But those of you that know and understand what was there before Islam Makhachev, that was Khabib Nurmagomedov. Khabib dominated for his tenure, reigning at 155-pound division. Then he retired with his dad passing away and everything. You know what I'm saying? He subbed out Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje. I mean, you know, it's one of those deals where he went out on his own terms. He was ranked top pound for pound too, and undefeated. So he retires, and Charles Oliveira has the opportunity. He goes in there and picks up the belt. I'm not going in detail about Charles Oliveira. Charles Oliveira goes in there and picks up the belt. He loses the belt on the scales, but they give him an opportunity, since he won, to go back in there and fight. And Islam Makhachev subs him out in the second round. Now Islam is the title holder. He is the stablemate of Khabib Nurmagomedov. He is the next coming, so they say. They say to be a champion, you have to defend your belt. So therefore, what the UFC do, people? This is why I love mixed martial arts, but I love the UFC too. But I love the mixed martial arts arena, because what the UFC does is allow people that are top contenders to compete. This man just got off from defeating a former champion in Charles Oliveira, right? I'm talking about Charles Oliveira defending his title. Well-versed, certified champion, all that shit. Islam goes in here and subs this man out in an arm triangle. I believe it's an arm triangle. And they put him in here with an upcoming killer from the featherweight division, Alexander Volkanovski. No chill. No chill, bro. You pick up the title and you fight another heavy hitter. Another heavy hitter, bro. Now you have the champion at the featherweight division moving up to the lightweight division to face a guy who haven't had the opportunity to defend his belt. And this is just not for this fight. This is what goes on a lot over there at the UFC. They allow people to see that they have a single belt system. They allow people to see that they put their fighters in with one another on a repetitive basis. I totally enjoy the rotation as far as these fighters having the opportunity to fight and fight for a championship. They don't get no twice a year. If you're fighting twice a year over here in MMA, you're suspended. Or something. There's something going on with you. But real talk, these guys ain't getting 8-week training camps over here. I've watched mixed martial artists train on a regular. Their training is much different. Working off your back, body-to-body contact, sweaty mats. Man, it's just not like coming in there, you know what I'm saying, just lacing up some gloves and, just hitting the mitts and everything. It's a different type of regime. No knock on boxing, but I'm saying you got to be built different to be in training, be able to work BJJ, wrestling, you know what I'm saying, work your Muay Thai, boxing, grappling. All that requires you to what? Have a partner. That's what sucks about that. Like boxers, really as a boxer, you can train and you can work on your hand speed, footwork and everything, hit the bag, all that. They do that in mixed martial arts too. But when you get down to the nitty gritty, just like boxing, they have sparring periodically. Well, here, in order for you to work the other levels, such as the ground game and the wrestling, you have to have somebody with you most of the time. We're not talking about drills now. We're not talking about drills. We're talking about actual getting a feel of how to execute a movement, how to learn how to manipulate someone's weight, learn how to see what that feels like, getting the form and technique down. You know what I'm saying? It takes constant remediation with a working body. But anyway, Alexander Volkanovski, who you see on the thumbnail with the belt, excuse me, he gets his shot at Islam Makhachev, who just won the belt. It's just crazy. I love it. This shit is going to be crazy. But they're not fighting UFC 281. They're fighting UFC 284. But it's a title fight, though. It is a title fight. Now, the great part about this is, if Alexander Volkanovski defeats Islam, he will become champ. All right? And this is a heavier weight class, stronger grapplers. Everything is stronger. You know what I'm saying? The level is different. Even though you're still dealing with the 5 pounds now. I mean the 10 pounds. You're still dealing with the 10 pounds. It gets a little shaky after 155, but you can go for 135, the 125, 135, 145, and 155. You're still dealing with the 10 pounds. But it gets a little shaky when you go from 155 to 170. That's when it becomes, the heavy hitters, 4-ounce gloves. And you got to be built for that shit. So Alexander Volkanovski is undefeated in the UFC. So I'm curious to know how he's going to go up here and, contend against Islam. Islam has one loss in the UFC way back when he initially entered. But this is going to be a very, very good fight at 155 pounds. If Islam wins, from my understanding, if I'm thinking about what the UFC, he should win the 145-pound belt, and then he can vacate it. Or they might allow, Alexander Volkanovski to move up and try to contend for the higher belt. But it would be, in my opinion, a bit unfair if Volkanovski is able to go up there and contend for the 55-pound belt, but Islam is not able to pick up the 145-pound belt, granted, if he picks up the victory. So we'll see how that plays out. The one thing about Islam, he has a lot of pressure. He has Khabib as one of his head coaches. Khabib is doing big things with Eagle FC. If he goes in there and fails to defend that belt, I don't know. It's gonna be very unfortunate, man. It's gonna hit home. You know what I'm saying? It's gonna hit him in the head like a cinder block. Real talk. You know what I'm saying? I like both fighters in this one, man. Volkanovski's a bad dude. Islam a bad dude. Let's see what happens. Now, Dusrin Poirier and Michael Chandler are two of the primary fighters I want to talk about, because there's a lot of history with Dusrin Poirier. You know what I'm saying? Him and Conor McGregor had like a rivalry. Him and Justin Gaethje didn't have enough time to develop as a robbery. You know what I'm saying? He ended up beating Justin Gaethje. But let's talk about this. Dustin Poirier is one of those guys who had so many opportunities to build up himself, to get a shot at the belt, and he just couldn't get it done. He had his shot with Charles Oliveira as of recent, and then early he had his shot at Khabib Nurmagomedov. He couldn't get it done. You know, he was subbed out in the third frame. But he is indeed without a title. His only title is an interim, where him and Max Holloway fought for the interim title prior to him going in there and fighting Khabib Nurmagomedov. He did win an interim title at lightweight. Okay. His record, though. His record is sick. He's a Hall of Famer without a title. Listen, he took a loss in WEC. Right? He took a loss in WEC. To an undefeated Danny Castillo at the time. And then, you know, the WEC dissolved due to the actions of the UFC. He came into the UFC and worked his way up. And then he finally ran into a one of them names that was going to be a person that will later go on to be a champion. And that was Max Holloway. You want to hear something crazy? Dustin Poirier is 28 wins, 7 defeats. All right? 33 years old at the time. But do you know when he came in to the UFC, he had, I would say, had about, let me count, 1, 2, 3. 3 fights. 1, 2, 3. 3 fights before he stepped in there with Max Holloway. You know he defeated Max Holloway in round 1. But yet Max Holloway would go on to be champion before Dustin Poirier. It's wild. So he defeated Max Holloway, and then he lost to Chung Sung Jung. Darce choke. Chung Sung Jung still haven't been able to get championship right. Then he defeats Jonathan Brookins. He loses to Cub Swanson, who many consider the Hall of Famer. Without a championship, he's fought the who's who in mixed martial arts. He fought Eric Koch, Diego Brandao, all these guys, you know, names that was on the come up. And then he ran into Conor McGregor. This is back in 2014, y'all, September 2014. He runs into Conor McGregor, and Conor McGregor stops him in round 1. Conor McGregor stops Dustin Poirier in round 1 via punches. So he gets another setback. And this time, this is like his 3rd loss in the UFC, man. You know, his longest winning streak up to that point was 3 fights. So he goes on and win against Diego Ferreira. Then Yancy Medeiros, who had a lot of hype behind him back in the day. Joe Duffy. Bobby Green. You know, Bobby Green still out there plugging along. He just lost bad to Charles Oliveira. But, you know what I'm saying? He's improved too, but I'm not sure he ever see a championship. But Justin beat Bobby Green. So he goes on like a 4-fight win streak this time. And then goes in there against Michael Johnson, who another fighter who's never been champion, who's been in there with the who's who. And you're probably saying to yourself, well, you know, it's easy for them to be in there with the who's who if they keep on letting them fight the who's who. Exactly. So it's up to them to continue to improve and get better. So he went in there and fought Michael Johnson round 1 punches, y'all. He lost to Michael Johnson in round 1 punches. He lost to Conor McGregor round 1 punches. You know what I'm saying? That's crazy, bro. So he goes on to fight one of the Miller brothers, Jim Miller. Won a majority decision. No contest against Eddie Alvarez. That was a damn good fight right there. And Dustin Poirier was coming on real good until they say he landed an illegal knee and Eddie couldn't continue. I don't know about that, but I thought Dustin Poirier was going to win that fight. So it was called a no contest in round 2. He goes in there and fights Showtime, Anthony Pettis. My fault. He fights Anthony Pettis, and Pettis comes down with a rib injury. And I'm going to be honest with you, I thought Pettis was losing that fight. And Dustin Poirier looked very, very sharp. At this point in his career, he's looking very sharp. I say, man, this Dustin right here, he's going to get a title shot, no doubt. So he disperses Pettis, who had a rib injury, goes on to fight Justin Gaethje. Justin Highlight Gaethje, bro. One of the guys that came on for World Series of Fighting, who had some very, very memorable fights over there. I'm talking about bang it out, knock him out, drag him, bang out fights, man. And he finally got his call up to the UFC, just like the guy in the thumbnail, Michael Chandler. So he goes in there and defeats Justin Gaethje round 4. I mean, that was a war. It's just Dustin Poirier had the better hands. And then he fights Eddie Alvarez again in a rematch after the no contest, the illegal knee, right? He stops him in round 2. Like I'm saying to myself, Dustin Poirier, man, he's on a roll, goddammit. He's doing his thing. I'm saying he on like a 4-fight win streak at this point in time, this person, Eddie Alvarez. So guess what? They say, you know what? Let's get back in with Max Holloway. You know what I'm saying? Let's put him back in there with Max Holloway. So this is with Max Holloway. Check this out now. This is the interesting part about it. You're saying to yourself, Max Holloway at that time was the featherweight world champion, 145 pounds. You're right. Max Holloway was down to 145. Dana allowed him to move up to 155 and fight for the interim title against Dustin Poirier. Now, clearly, there was a size advantage to Dustin Poirier. He goes in there and he wins the unanimous decision. I mean, that was a war, especially for Max. It took a lot out of him, that fight, in my opinion. These knock him out, drag out fights with Max, it took a lot out of his body, right? So he beats Max Holloway via UD. So Dustin Poirier gets his shot finally at the man, the Eagle, Khabib Nurmagomedov, and he subs him out in round 3, rear naked choke. He subbed Conor out in round 4 with a fulcrum choke. So, you know, Khabib is subbing dudes left and right. Like, it's not like he can't beat you into submission. That's if he wants to. He gets his title shot. You know what I'm saying? He won the interim lightweight title. Beat Max Holloway. Gets his title shot with Khabib. So he goes in here and they start to build him back up for another title shot. So he's fighting the top names now. He gets in there with Dan Hooker and goes to a decision with Dan Hooker in 2020. And finally, he gets a chance to rematch Conor McGregor, a person who stopped him early in the career, y'all. You remember I said Conor McGregor stopped him in round 1 with punches? Well, he finally gets his opportunity. Now, this is after Conor McGregor had went on to win a championship. Not just 1, but 2, y'all. So right now, you would think to yourself, damn, Conor McGregor should be, you know, after all that championship experience and fighting Floyd Mayweather, he should be able to go in here and fight Dustin Poirier. And you know, it is what it is. No, not at all. Conor McGregor gets a rematch with Dustin, and Dustin just looked like he was level above the former champ. We're talking about a guy who used to be champ at 145 pounds and 155 pounds. You know what I'm saying? The guy who moved up to welterweight, 170 freaking pounds. We're talking about Conor McGregor, who moved from 145 all the way up to 170 pounds in the welterweight division and fought Nate Diaz for 2 fights. Fought Nate for 2 fights. I'm talking about back-to-back now. Then moved down and fought Eddie Alvarez now at 155 now. People act like this shit is impossible to do. Just think about somebody doing that. They move up from welterweight. They move from welterweight, y'all, up to light heavy or super middle. They move from welterweight up to super middleweight, damn near. A light heavyweight. You know what I'm saying? It's more so, 170 pounds is just outside super middleweight. Just imagine that shit. So he goes in there and he beats Conor McGregor with punches. So it's like, once again, it's 1-1. It's a rubber match. Conor McGregor beat him early in his career with punches, and then Dustin Poirier defeats Conor McGregor with punches. What they do? Oh, we're going to give you a trilogy. We ain't having no negotiation, no contract issues and all that. Hey, a trilogy it is. We're going to bring you back in 6 months. You good? You good? Okay, boom. They come back in there 6 months, and Dustin was still putting them paws on Conor, and it was the fight was stopped due to Conor McGregor's ankle, being fucked up, broken. It looked wild. So now Dustin Poirier gets the opportunity to get back in there with Charles Oliveira, a person that he hasn't fought yet, but to get back in there for a championship with Charles Oliveira, who is a current reigning defending champion. So he goes in there. Granted, he went in there with Khabib, right? He fought Khabib for a championship in 2019, September 2019. Now it's December 2021, and he's in there fighting Charles Oliveira, and he gets subbed out in round 3, the same round Khabib subbed him out in. Via what? The same submission, RNC. Oh, my God. How frustrating it must be for Dustin Poirier to go through that shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's fought the who's who in his career, but to get to the championship level and come up short, it has to be tremendously stressful in this dude, right? And not only that, to go in there in the championship fights and you're losing via submission. It's not like he doesn't have a ground game. It's just levels to the ground game. It has to do with the punishment you receive, or the cardio factor, or whatever, your opponent's strengths and weaknesses, your strength and weakness. It's just too many variables to even compute, But he loses in round 3 in December 2021. Now, a year later, he's fighting Michael Chandler. Michael Chandler, very, very interesting journey that he's had too. 23-7. He's 36 years old, 3 years older than Dustin Poirier. This was a fighter who was former champion in Bellator, and he comes over here to the UFC finally after defeating Benson Henson, who was a former UFC world champion. You know what I'm saying? A former UFC world champion. And he comes over here, and his first fight is a top contender. Once again, UFC doing this shit, dog. They say, okay, we're gonna bring you over here to the from Bellator to the UFC, which they don't do a lot of now. They said, we're gonna give you Dan Hooker. He said, okay, sign me up. All right, cool. Sign me up. I'll take that. Because this is Michael Chandler is trying to work himself to another title contention, just like freaking Dustin Poirier. So he goes in there and he fights Dan Hooker, knocks him out in the first fucking round, man. Look, I couldn't believe what I was looking at. I say, no, Dan Hooker, nah, he that was too easy. So I said, damn. A lot of talk was going around the UFC at the time, right? Because they felt that Michael Chandler was coming over here from Bellator, and somehow, some way, he was getting treatment, preferential treatment, like he was getting that special VIP service, and they couldn't understand why. Because Justin Gaethje didn't get that shit. But Michael Chandler comes over here. He wasn't even reigning champion at the time he left Bellator. He comes over here to the UFC and gets a shot at Dan Hooker. Shout out Captain Chaos on deck. Andrew Charles on deck. Salute to y'all. So he gets... So Michael Chandler defeats Dan Hooker and gets a shot at the current reigning lightweight champion Charles Oliveira. He goes in there and loses via ground and pound round 2. He gets his shot, and then he goes in there and then lose via submission with Charles, because he had been losing via submission a lot when in fights. I'm like, okay. So, I mean, not Michael Chandler, but Dustin Poirier. Michael Chandler has more of a wrestling background. I got thrown off right there looking at something else. But Michael Chandler has more so of a wrestling background. Not highly skilled when it comes to BJJ, but he has a very high-level wrestling background, pedigree. So he goes in here, defeats Dan Hooker, loses against Charles Oliveira in round 2. Now, if you remember what I said about Dustin Poirier, he lost in round 3 against Charles Oliveira. Michael Chandler loses in round 2. The UFC is looking at this shit like, let's give him one more shot to build himself back up to a title shot. What they do, man? They give this man who came over to the UFC and took a L on his second fight in the UFC, they give him Justin Highlight Gaethje. He was one of the ones talking shit. He was like, how did he get a title shot before me? I mean, like, how is he going to get a piece of Charles Oliveira before me? I've been over here longer than he has. How does that work? Why we ain't fighting? So Michael Chandler, after losing to Charles Oliveira, he goes in there against Justin Gaethje, and they have an all-out fisticuffs, hand-to-hand freaking warfare. And Michael Chandler comes out on the losing end of that. That's back-to-back losses now. That's back-to-back losses. He loses to the champion, Michael Chandler, and he loses to Justin Gaethje. That's back-to-back loss. What they do? They put him back in there with Tony Ferguson, who Tony Ferguson is trying his best to become champion too. So we have Michael Chandler, Dustin Poirier, and Tony Ferguson. All right? All of these guys are very top elite fighters, but they haven't won a championship because it's only one belt system. It's not all this secondary and thirdary and fourthary belts. It's one belt system. So you might take some losses until you get an opportunity to get your shot. I'm not talking about the interim. I'm talking about the title. So he goes in there, and they give him Tony Ferguson, and he kicks him in the motherfucking face, dog. He gives you Anderson Silva, Randy Couture type shit, dog. Look, Michael Chandler is not even known for his kicks. He kicks Tony Ferguson in the fucking face and knocks him out. This was more like a teep kick. So he knocks him out in round 2. So this was earlier this year. And now, November 12th, they are allowing him to step back in there for potentially another title eliminator to fight the winner of Islam Makhachev and Alexander Volkanovski. You see how beautiful that transition and that rotation works? They're about to send Michael Chandler in there to fight Dustin Poirier on the UFC 281 undercard. And they're the last freaking fight in the main card before it goes to the co-main event. So they are allowing Michael Chandler to get a second shot at the winner. And they're allowing Dustin Poirier. This is going to be a damn good fight, man. Both of these guys got pretty good hands. I'm thinking the whooping that Michael Chandler took against Justin Gaethje, he has to go into this fight believing that Dustin Poirier had the better hands. But Dustin Poirier has to go into this fight knowing that Michael Chandler has the better wrestling. Hands down. He has the better wrestling. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see how this plays out. 5 rounds, 5 minutes apiece, 4-ounce gloves. And it's going to be contended at the 155-pound division, the lightweight division. It's going to be a very, very solid fight card. Now, speaking of the fight card, right? Let me give you a little let me give you a preview of this fight card. It's going down November 12th, Saturday. All right? On Saturday. November 12th on Saturday. It's on a Saturday. Next Saturday, okay? Let me give you a preview of this card. In the main event, man, you have Izzy, the style bender, Adesanya, 23-1, a fighter that I thought coming over from kickboxing, right? I thought he would take a loss before he become champion, but he defeated Robert Whittaker. He's going in there against Alex Pereira, his nemesis in kickboxing, the man that knocked him out, man. He's 6-1 in mixed martial arts, and they giving this man a title shot after Israel Adesanya had to work his way up the chain with damn near, 7, 8, 9 fights, whatever. He had way more fights than Alex Pereira. Alex Pereira is 6-1 in mixed martial arts, not in the UFC. And they giving him a shot because of the background and history that they have in kickboxing. Once again, I love it. I love what the UFC matchmakers do. They allow these fighters to fight one another. That's why boxing is so far behind administratively, because it's so much red tape to go through to get a fight. You have all these reality shows going on when it comes to boxing. But when I talk to you about MMA, it's a whole lot simpler to speak on, but it's a little bit difficult to understand what you're watching if you are trying to figure it out and educate yourself, right? Shout out to the Lost Art of Boxing on deck. What's good? I'm talking about the promotion there, Q. The promotion is UFC, but I'm talking about the sport of mixed martial arts. A lot of people in boxing, they'll say boxing and the UFC. No. Mixed martial arts is the sport. Boxing is a sport. UFC just happened to be the premier organization, the promotion in mixed martial arts. All right, because they was one of the early ones that just was able to get everything sanctioned. You know, put some regulation to it. You know what I'm saying? Clean it up. Get them weight classes down. Start using gloves. Cleaning up the damn strikes that was allowed, because they was trying to say it was a blood sport, and dudes was just allowed to kick motherfuckers in the head like it was a soccer ball. So it's came a long way. So you got Israel Adesanya, right, and Alex Pereira, and the co-main. Look at this shit right here. Carla Esparza facing Weili ZZhang. Now I can go on and on about how they're in rotation again, y'all. Carla Esparza was the first women's strawweight champion. She was the first women's strawweight champion coming out of Ultimate Fighter. She defeated Thug Rose Namajunas. And of course, she would go on. She ended up losing her title. You know what I'm saying? And but she's fought the who's who in the strawweight division. Very, very solid wrestler, but she's been working on her hands. And she's pretty damn well-rounded right now. She's going in there with Weili ZZhang, who doesn't have that same story. Look, Weili ZZhang was the first Chinese world champion in the UFC, right? She came over here and was able to establish herself based off her fight with Jessica Andrade. Okay, I always run this story back. Thug Rose Namajunas was already champion from defeating Joanna Jędrzejczyk, and she went in there and fought Jessica Andrade again, and Andrade dumped Thug Rose on her head. So Jessica Andrade becomes the women's strawweight champion and goes in there and fight who? Weili ZZhang, the Chinese mixed martial artist. She stops her in the first round. Punch for punch, power for power. Wrong game plan for Jessica Andrade, who they call the Pocket Tyson. She gets knocked out. So Weili ZZhang becomes the champion. Now, They give once again Joanna Jędrzejczyk, who was defeated by Thug Rose in the first round. They give her an opportunity to come in there and test her will against Weili ZZhang for China. She loses a split decision. So now Thug Rose Namajunas comes back around. The former champion, Thug Rose Namajunas, comes back around to fight Weili ZZhang for the title. That's after fighting Jessica Andrade again. Okay? Check out the rotation. Thug Rose Namajunas fought Jessica Andrade again after being dumped on her head and won via decision. So they allow her to come back into title picture and face Zhang Weili, a former champion. Now, did I tell you Thug Rose was the opponent for Carla Esparza when they introduced this strawweight division and she lost to Carla Esparza? You know what I'm saying? She lost to Carla Esparza. So Carla would be champion, and then Thug Rose would have to work her way up and take a much tougher route. When she was on the brink of fighting for the championship, she lost to Karolina Kowalkiewicz. So she had to fight again to get herself in title contention. My point is, they allow these fighters to get in rotation to contend for a belt. So Thug Rose goes in there and knocks out Weili ZZhang. And the head kick, y'all. The head kick hurt all around the motherfucking world. And this was in 2021, April 2021. Then they say, okay, in November, we're going to bring you back for a rematch. What? So check this out. They brought her back for a rematch, bro. Her being Weili ZZhang, who was just knocked out in the first round by Thug Rose Namajunas. The same Thug Rose Namajunas that knocked out Joanna Jędrzejczyk when they first fought for the championship. Thug Rose was the challenger. Thug Rose was a challenger. Thug Rose Namajunas was a challenger in both her championship fights when she initially stepped up. She cleaned out Joanna in round one, and she cleaned out Weili ZZhang in round one. She became the first woman to be a champion, lose it, and regain it. So she comes up there and gets a rematch. Weili ZZhang gets a rematch, y'all. And she loses via split decision, back-to-back losses. So what did they do? In the first half of 2022, they give her Joanna Jędrzejczyk, the former strawweight champion, who was going on her sixth title defense before Thug Rose knocked her out. Now, they're putting Weili ZZhang in there with Carla Esparza for another championship fight, y'all. Can you imagine that shit? Could you imagine this going down in boxing? Look at what I just told y'all, right? Look at what I just told you, bro. Did you see all the history that went behind Jessica Andrade fighting, having her shot, losing, building back up, going in there, finally getting her title against Thug Rose Namajunas, dumped on her head, won the title. She goes in there, loses the title against Zhang Weili. And the meanwhile, Rose Namajunas is fighting to get back in the title contention. Finally does. She goes in there and knocks out Weili ZZhang in the round one. What they say? Oh, okay, no problem. You was the champion. You got knocked down in round one. We're going to give you a chance to get your title back. They bring her back, and then she loses via split decision. 2 back-to-back losses, y'all. Zhang Weili, the Chinese fighter. 2 back-to-back losses. She said, okay, let's give her Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Boom. She knocks her out with a spinning back fist. Now she's about to go get a title shot. And that was early this year. She's about to get a title shot next week. Again. She's going in to try to win a title for the second time. And look, she hadn't really been in the UFC for an extensive period of time with the big names. She has a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 fights in the UFC. But check this out. She was in the UFC 1, 2, 3 fights. She was in the UFC 3 fights, man. And they gave her a championship fight against Jessica Andrade. Amazing. She was only in the UFC for 3 fights, and they gave her Jessica Andrade, and she freaking stopped in round 1. Defended her title against Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Lost it against Thug Rose twice, right? She lost twice, back to back. Gave her Joanna again. The first time she fought her, it was a split decision win. The second time, she knocked her out. So they're giving her another title shot. Love it, man. I love it. I love the way they do it as far as putting fighters in rotation. I mean, it's different, bro. I'm not going to lie to you. It's much different. It's way different, man. You get to see the fighters that you see. You don't have to wait because somebody's saying, oh, man, we can't bring him back over here. He got knocked out in round 1. Not in mixed martial arts, not in the UFC. They will allow you to get back in the groove, work your way back up, and then bring you on deck. You know what I'm saying? So let's get back to the card. Carla Esparza, co-main event, Weili ZZhang championship, women's strawweight championship. Dusrin Poirier is the last fight on the main card. He's fighting Michael Chandler. Then you have Franklin Answer Edgar, who was a former champion at featherweight. He's fighting Chris Gutierrez. And, of course, Dan Hooker, who I mentioned, who is a common opponent with both of these guys. He's a common opponent with Dustin Poirier. He's a common opponent with Michael Chandler. He's fighting Claudio Puelles. And, you know, and the rest of the guys that's on here. It's a very, very stacked card. Even with the guys who's fighting on the undercard, I mean, they have a total of 14 fights on this card, y'all. They're giving you 2 championship fights. They're giving you 2 championship fights. They're giving you Israel Adesanya, middleweight champion, and they're giving you Carla Esparza, 2-time strawweight champion. 2-time strawweight champion. You got some Hall of Fame shit going on right here. You got some Hall of Fame shit. Look, out of the main event and the co-main event, the only person on that roster in these 2 fights who don't have a belt in the UFC yet is Alex Pereira. Izzy has a belt. Carla Esparza had the belt twice. You know, she's a current reigning defending champion. And Weili ZZhang, she's a former champion. She had the belt. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's what I'm talking about. They give you the opportunity to become world champion. They keep you in the cage, bro. Beautiful scene, man. I ain't gonna lie. It can be beautiful when it want to. Shout out to Tony Boswell on deck, man. Much respect at World Combat Sports in the chat. Just got in from work, man. Salute to you all day, every day, man. Salute to you and what you got going on over there. You know what I'm saying? Providing for your family. Shout out to everybody that's on deck. You know, do with the chats doing boxing. Like the ones that's been rocking since day one. Yeah, if I see you, I'm definitely gonna goddamn shout you out, no doubt. But I'm a limit. You know, like super chats, of course I'm gonna read. But it's getting to a point right now I can't even catch up in the dang live chat all the time. And it kind of takes away from my live streaming. So since the channel is picked up when I'm talking about boxing, of course, it's going to be, you know, pretty much what I'm talking about on topic. And then those individuals who either, you know, drop a super chat or that I know. You know, like Tony Boswell, I've known him forever and a day, bro. You know what I'm saying? There's some people on here that's been here since the longest time. You know what I'm saying? Captain Chaos, you already know what it is, man. You know what I'm saying? So, pretty much, UFC 281 is going to be live and in living color. Has a lot of good fights to it. Like I said before, Islam Makhachev is the new current reigning lightweight champion. And he's a Khabib protege. So, therefore, a lot of people are going to be tuned in. They want to see, can this man defend the belt? and go on a tear like Khabib did. So that is what everybody is waiting on. You know what I'm saying? This is lightweight supremacy. But if you're looking at the thumbnail, like I said, Islam in the middle holding the belt, he is the current reigning defending. But when you look at Alexander Volkanovski, who's holding his belt, he's the current reigning defending featherweight titleist. So you take Alexander Volkanovski, who's attempting to do what Max Holloway attempted to do when he was champion. They allowed Max to try to move up to 155 and fight for the championship, but he had to go to an interim title first. He lost that against Dusrin Poirier. You feel me? So now Alexander Volkanovski, he's in the same shoes. He's about to make a shift, change, go up to 155 and fight the newly crowned champion, Islam Makhachev. This is going to be incredible because you're talking about a guy who has incredible sambo, skills. You know what I'm saying? Khabib, he has that background in sambo. And then you have Alexander Volkanovski, who's a very, very well-rounded striker, and his boxing is incredible. Max Holloway, when he was fighting Kevin Kattar, he said, I'm the best boxer in the UFC. Shit, Alexander shut that shit down. So behind Alexander Volkanovski with the belt is Michael Chandler, and to the left of him is Dustin Poirier. Them guys are going to fight next weekend. They will be the lightweight contenders to potentially step in there in the cage to fight the winner of Islam and Volkanovski. All four of these guys are very, very elite fighters. Real talk. But the one with the least experience in the UFC is the guy who's holding up the belt. Like I say again, mixed martial arts has a different rotation period when it comes to rotating their fighters in and out. That's why I love it, man. I love mixed martial arts on them having one belt system. They having their own promotions. And within that promotion, they have their own signed fighters. And you're probably saying to yourself, boxing does too. Yeah, they do. But you're talking about their own belt system. It changes a lot. And then this is some other gems. I don't know if you know this, but contrary to the way it started, when everybody was coming there with their own uniforms, whether they would come in with trunks and no shirt or freaking a gi, hash guard, whatever, the UFC brought in Reebok and they made a fight kit. So unlike boxing, that people buy uniforms all the time and they come in there with their sponsors and all that. That's the bad thing about the UFC. The UFC, you can't have all those sponsors anymore. But you don't have to worry about buying no uniform because you get a fighter's kit. You get the UFC shorts. Both the men and the women can either wear spandex or the shorts. And then, of course, the women wear tops. And the guys just they wear the shorts, no shoes, no socks, none of that. So that's the fighter's kit. And, of course, you get gloves. You don't have to worry about going in there, seeing if the gloves are horsehair, seeing if they're Grant gloves, title gloves, having the debate on which gloves you want. They supply you with the gloves, UFC brand. That's where they cut out a lot of the bullshit. You get their gloves, their fighter's kit, and you go fight. And it's their belts under their promotion. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't get any better than that shit. It doesn't get any better than that, bro. Just like Bellator, the same thing. And then, boxing, they do have similarities. You have fighters with the red or the blue on, when it comes to the wrapping of the gloves, the taping of the gloves and stuff. And then, the same way with MMA, they have the red and the blue, signify which corner the fight is going to and stuff like that. And for the judges, of course, there'll always be a red and blue system. They're the distinctive colors when it comes down to it. But like I say, man, if you haven't started watching mixed martial arts, this is not a sport that you're just going to be able to jump in and out like they do boxing. There's a lot of cats that can think they can jump in boxing and know everything just based off the channels they go to and hanging out in the YTC. You can't do that shit with mixed martial arts. You can't do it with mixed martial arts. It's just too many fighters that's not familiar. It's too many fights that's going on. I mean, like you don't have, like in MMA, they have so many freaking gems. You know, like they have so many fighters that you may not hear about. And somewhat the same as boxing, but it's just like the interest level really have to be there. You really have to want to pay attention, so to speak, because you're talking about some people that's not even really enthused about wrestling. They don't want to see nobody get kicked. But it's a very, very beautiful system when it comes to combat sports. It uses everything from your head to your feet. The only thing about it, it is not a 9th limb type of combat system. It is an 8 limb combat system. And the good thing about it is you still can use your head while you're in the clinch for position, but it's no way that you can headbutt your opponent or anything like that. And also, if you're picking your opponent up and slam them, you can slam them if you know what you're doing, and make sure you drive your head into their jawline when they hit the canvas, and just like Randy Couture did. I forgot who he slammed like that. Broke his freaking nose. I mean, it's an all-around sport. It's mixed martial arts, man. At the end of the day, a beautiful system. Beautiful system. But man, hey, that's all I got for today, man. Appreciate y'all for pulling up. I definitely will check in another day, probably tomorrow. Shout out to the everybody in the chat. Appreciate you pulling up. Hit the like button on the way out. And like I said, you already know. Turn up and tune in to World Combat Sports. I'm out.